Hi, I'm Laura,
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe. Hello.
and welcome to our Lymond Book Club, where we are reading Checkmate by Dorothy Dunnett. And today we're going to talk about part 3, chapters 1, 2, and 3. Philippe will lead the discussion, but before we dive in, any thoughts you both want to share?
I'm very stressed. I feel like these chapters were like uniquely designed to just completely stress me out because it was like a party that goes is a disaster, and that you're sort of like secondhand embarrassment for people and stressed about making the party go well. Then there's like tension, like people, you can't control a social situation that goes crazy. Then there's like an athletic thing where you have to like ride all night and do this athletic stuff. And then there's family tension and it's family stressful. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to the end of chapter 3 and I'm like, I need a nap.
Mhm.
So did Lymond.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Chapter 2 was painful for me to read. It's just a giant dumpster fire of a chapter. I mean, it's good and fun things happen, and there's that sort of great argument scene back at the hotel with Marta and Lymond. But I had to read and reread and reread again the party to understand what was happening. And then it was painful in the second part because of just all of this fun and frivolity they were having just falling apart completely. So, but it was sort of a nice sort of precursor disaster to the disaster of Lymond thinking Richard was dead and then confronting his mother, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts on these chapters because like we go through these like intense emotions and these different like extreme emotions, from the hilarity to then like the extreme melodrama. There's some line that Philippa has about how it was the longest time she'd spent with her husband, and the emotions she went through. But I think like I love the banquet, it's hilarious, and it's like it's weird though because it's like this darker twist on the earlier scene with Lyman and Philippa where they were having so much fun, where they're having an amazing time until Marta tries to throw them together and everything goes to hell. And then it just goes into like super melodrama with, the two being thrown together, and then the night ride, and the Lyman and Sibylla and Richard. Um, and I don't know, like generically, I'm not a super fan of melodrama. It was a little much for me. Um, but I also really love the scene with Jarrett and Lyman. We'll dive into it when we get to that, where we're in Jarrett's point of view. There's like a whole lot of like extreme psychosexual undercurrents happening between Jarrett and Marta and Lyman and Philippa and Austin. That's interesting. So yeah.
Yep.
I was thinking like, oh, this isn't that many pages. Should we read more than 3? And then I was like, no, there's a lot going on in these 3.
Yeah, I think we stopped at the right place. So,
Yeah, for sure.
so let's jump in. Chapter 1.
Okay.
First thing I'd like to do is congratulate myself on the fact that I actually took notes that are legible this time. So, I'm just gonna do. There's a lot of like little breakups in this, so I'm just gonna do the whole chapter, and then we can go back. So, the beginning of chapter 1, the French army is drunk with celebration that they won this fight at Calais. Lymond is given extra land, and he's also given a hotel, the Hotel de Hercule or Hercule in Paris. And we sort of get the sense that Archie and the captains of St. Mary's are not really letting Lymond be alone, even though he has no real need to be alone in these 4 weeks that he stays sort of before coming back to Paris. On Philippa's side, she's sort of tutoring Catherine de Albon. Instead of being like a traditional friendship, it's more seen as like a tutor to a pupil. She's like teaching her the lute and like all these things. And I think she's just getting her ready for her marriage to Lymond that they all think is going to happen. Philippa ends up talking to Queen Catherine de' Medici about the wedding. That's a fun little conversation we can talk about. Philippa's also being followed by one of Applegarth's men, and she learns about all of these sort of shenanigans that the soldiers are having out in the field. And then Lymond returns on February 16th to a note from Philippa saying they've been invited to a banquet thrown by the Cardinal of Lorraine, and Austen is still with Lymond. When they all go to the banquet together, or before that, Philippa keeps insisting that she's staying in France until after Mary Queen of Scots' wedding, because she is sort of on retainer for her. Lymond leaves Austen and Philippa together, and Philippa actually is really kind to him and like tries to fortify his belief, or to negate his belief that like his family is an embarrassment. And she's like, no, you actually fought really well, and like you're the talk of France right now. And then Lymond and Philippa talk. Lymond tells her about Isabel and the hotel, or not the hotel, the house where she is. And Lymond also knows already that Richard and Sibylla are coming. And Philippa asks about the headaches. And then we end the chapter with Philippa assuming, rightfully so, that Lymond does know the name of his father now. That's what he got from René Jourda.
Or I would say the name of Sibylla's lover, because I'm not
Yes.
sure if
True.
convinced that's his father. So I guess just jumping right in, there's an interesting push-pull at the beginning with him being given land adjacent to the property of the Marshal of Saint-André, which is obviously the French crown trying to be like, stay, look, I'm setting you up with this connection to this really powerful family and power and wealth and blah, blah, blah. And then you have right afterward the Cardinal of Lorraine having not forgotten his concern for Lymond's marriage, because the De Guises want Lymond out of there because he's a competitor, so they would much rather have him stay wedded to Philippa and go back to Scotland.
So the Cardinal of Lorraine is not the Cardinal de Guise.
He's Cardinal de Guise, but he's not the Duke de Guise. It's
okay.
his brother. So it's like the
brother.
Duke de Guise and his younger brother, the Cardinal de Guise.
Okay.
So the Cardinal probably so that's, I'm a little confused about that. So like the king wants Lymond to stay in France, but the Duke de Guise and the Cardinal probably want Lymond to go to Scotland. So, I mean, is the Cardinal working all that hard to get the annulment?
No, the implication here is that the Cardinal, like the Duke, doesn't want the annulment to happen.
Yeah. So,
like he actually went and talked to Philippa about how talented her husband is, apparently.
Yeah.
Because like the De Guises are trying to cement their power, and so he's a competitor to them.
Yeah.
And I also wonder, I don't know, but I wonder like if they know that he's potentially an ally of their niece and would serve her interests in Scotland. So that's another reason to try to get him to go back. But I think it's mainly just about their power in France. I don't get the sense they care that much about Scotland.
Right.
And then we also find out, by the way, that the annulment is supposed to happen on the day after the Queen of Scots' marriage.
Which is in April at some point. April 16th? I don't know. I may just be pulling that date out of the ether.
Yes.
I did like Philippa's comment where she says, she replies to Kate. So Kate is asking, like, how come you're not coming back? And she replies, she saw no reason to miss the momentous spectacle of the Dowager Lady Coulter embracing the entire bewildered court of France, if not her difficult son. And it's just, I love that Philippa is like, grab the popcorn, Marge. I want to see what's going to happen. You know?
Yeah, she's also very Philippa in her like, however able, however superb the elements of the family Crawford undoubtedly were, individually they were going to require someone's help before this prospective visit to France was completed. So this idea of Philippa staying to be helpful, just like, you know, she went on this whole quest around the Mediterranean to be helpful. And of course, part of us, I think, is wondering, is this her real motivation, or is this what she's telling herself? Because she is in love with Lymond and has another motivation to stick around.
But I love that what she tells her mother is, oh, I'm staying because it's going to be entertaining. Like,
We also have just a one-line return of Nicholas de Nicolay.
Yay!
She watches him design a new map.
so fun. And just more like evidence of Philippa's like peer, like the sense that she's a peer to Lymond as she like listens and engages with all of the top minds of France.
Yeah, there's a part in the third chapter where Jared's looking at her and he thinks of her as an acolyte, and then he's like, actually, no, she's not an acolyte anymore, is she?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you
Look
get
at
these.
Jared being perceptive for once.
Is it even a broken clock is right twice a day?
Yeah, and then you get like this kind of melancholy description of her and Catherine de Albon, where like they're both so focused on Lymond, but not talking about it, and it's just kind of sad. Philippa's preparing this woman to marry the man she loves.
Because there's no actual proof that either of them have that that's what Lymond is going to do. He hasn't given any sign one way or another yet. So
He did save her mother, so I think that she probably took that as a sign of him being close.
But he also slept with her.
And there is a, was it Marcia says it later? Someone confirms that he slept with both parents. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. We don't know. Like, he's playing this very close to the vest, so he could just be totally disinterested in the Dalbans, just playing this game and ready to just go back to Russia as soon as he gets his annulment.
I like Philippa's reply to the queen. But you play as charmingly as your husband. You have no regrets about dissolving this marriage? None, your majesty, Philippa said. Marriage requires more than 2 lutes in counterpoint, felicitous though that may be. It's just a nice reply.
Yeah. And then just that the queen is like, well, you and I are going to have to work together to get these two together, you know, and you're just like, oh, that's so sad.
We also get the sense that Mary Queen of Scots has kind of given up at this point on trying to get the two of them to stay together because she has other concerns. She's more sort of taken up with the fact that her soon-to-be husband shot somebody's eye out, and I don't know, the Dauphin doesn't seem to be very competent. And of course, we know it doesn't seem to last much.
I was going to say, he's going to die pretty soon.
Yeah, I think the historical take on him was that he was like damaged or messed or maybe like mentally ill or inbred or something. Like he wasn't super healthy or mentally there. Of course, I don't know how real that is versus rumor, but he did die young.
Yeah.
Yeah, he dies like a year or two after they're married, right?
Yeah, somewhere like that.
Do we know if it was illness or an accident or like war or something?
I think it was illness.
I think it was illness, yeah.
Like it's like an ear infection or something, but I could be remembering.
It's a way to go.
No, it was the 1500s. They didn't have antibiotics.
I mean, yay, modern medicine. Thank goodness for penicillin.
I apologize if I'm wrong in remembering that, by the way. Okay, so there's also the implication that Philippa has heard about what Lymond got up to in France, because she makes a comment to Austen on 295. She says, you should never have let Mr. Crawford buy you. The Vidame de Chartres will challenge you out of jealousy. So I think implying that she knows that he got up to stuff with the men of the court in France. And it does not seem to have changed her opinion of being in love with him. So non-issue, even though, of course, to Lymond, it's probably a huge issue.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that Jarrett thinks about when he's sort of studying Philippa in that scene, is that there's this weight of all these previous lovers that Lymond has had that must be like heavy on her. And I don't think that could be further from the truth. I don't think she cares at all.
Jarrett is projecting and projecting and projecting, and it's not about Marta, it's about Lymond.
Yeah.
You just read Jarrett as like so repressed and so obsessed with Lymond and thinking about Lymond's last, previous male lovers and being like jealous and angry about it and totally not admitting it to himself. Oh, Jarrett.
Yeah. I also love Lymond's like, I haven't decided what to ransom Austin for. And Philippa just looks at him and she's like, money is the usual thing. Like, you idiot. So clearly she's like, what else is going on?
Yeah, well, and there's a clear parallel here where you have Catherine de Medici being like, we, mainly meaning Philippa, need to set up Lymond and Catherine in situations for their romance to develop. And then you have Lymond trying to set up Philippa in Austin in situations where their romance will develop, and like really transparently like putting the two of them alone together and then being like, I need to go do something now and leaving.
Right.
I need to go drink.
Yeah. Like,
I also like her she's talking about her outfit and she says, it's my husband hunting equipment. And he says, I don't hunt husbands, it's the other way about.
Yeah. Oh, people are hunting him.
But then he's so sweet to her, where he is the first person to say to her, he's sorry that she had to watch the rejoicing of the victory at Calais. And her eyes kind of tear up a little bit. He's the only person who thought of it.
Oh. Yeah.
And then Austin, when Lymond leaves the room, after that, what can I say that doesn't sound illiterate? Your jealousy is showing, and it's not a good look.
Yeah. He's got such an inferiority complex. I mean, honestly, rightfully so. But yeah.
I would think it's hard not to have an inferiority complex when you're in the same room with Lymond.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Austin seems to be he's definitely one of the people who has no sexual interest in Lymond, as far as we can tell. He's, because everyone either wants to kill him or sleep with him or both, and he's definitely on the kill him side of things.
Yeah.
Who's had his chance? He just didn't.
Didn't do it. Okay, so when Lymond and Philippa are in the carriage or whatever coach going to the party, and there's an exchange on 299 that I want to ask you guys about. And she asks why he's drinking. He says, why am I drinking? I am celebrating the wresting from you of Calais. Or shall I tell you the truth? The truth is that ... He had given the words incongruously the cadence almost of poetry. Then he broke off vaguely and picked up in a more painstaking tone. The truth is that I must be in a rather worse state than I thought I was. I apologize. What was he going to say?
I knew he was going to say, the truth is, I can't have what I want. Like, why is he drinking? He's stressed and he's not celebrating. I mean, he's celebrating a little bit, but.
Was he going to be like, the truth is that, like, what do you mean by what I want? What I can't have what I want?
Well, like, the truth is he wants Philippa. He can't have her. He wants, a family that's not in chaos and not his, and all those things. Like, he wants this life that he thinks he can't have, so he's drinking.
Was he gonna tell her he loves her?
Who knows? I don't know. He was gonna tell her something that he doesn't want to say, like whatever it was. I don't think we can say for sure what it was, but
I don't think he's quite ready, even in the state of drinking, to drop those words. But I think in some sort of clever way that he does, he may have alluded to it in some fashion.
Yeah, I feel like something was going to come out that either he would have said it explicitly or he would have said it through an allusion that she would have picked up upon and figured out. But it's just really interesting that it came so close to the surface because he's been trying so hard to keep it buried.
I think he was possibly, like you said, thinking of an allusion, but he also must realize that almost every allusion he makes, she figures out immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they finish each other's sentences. They quote from the same verses. There's a part in the play in the banquet next scene where they're both sort of quoting the same poem to Piero Strozzi about what's happening when they're like reenacting Jason and the Argonauts.
Well, probably the phrase "the truth is that" was the first part of the quote, because it's in italics, which is what all the quotes are. So probably he's like, "Shall I tell you the truth? The truth is that," and it was actually a quote that was going to go on to reveal something, but then he stopped it halfway through.
Is it possible that it's a continuation of the quote, the verse that's right above it? And can the things that I have do be hidden from thee then?
I don't know. Let me check. I got my companion here. Let's see if that's in here.
That sounds biblical. And can the things that I have do be bidden from thee then? Nay, nay, thou knowest them all, O Lord, where they were done and when.
Yeah, like he's continuing the phrase and then he realizes, oh, I don't want to finish the rest of this, so I'll stop and I'll say something else instead.
I don't think it's in here. Nope, it's not in here. So it must not be, because presumably it's important it would be. Lots of the other quotes are in here, by the way, if we ever want to translate.
I sort of like that interpretation. I personally think it's a continuation of the quote that he was giving. So, because it makes sense. It flows right into it.
I think also like he thinks later in that scene with Sibylla about how she was the only person that could get to him this way, and then he thinks no, there's one other, and so it's obviously Philippa. So I think he was gonna, like, what he was actually gonna say, the implications he was gonna reveal something to Philippa, because his defenses against her are not as strong as they are with anyone else, except Sibylla. Other thoughts on this chapter?
We've spoken at length about how kind Philippa is. And even if she has no interest for Austen, I really like on 298 how she's like, he feels like the Greys utterly failed to defend Calais, and her sort of comforting him and letting him know, like, you may have lost, but like, you're highly esteemed in France right now for even lasting as long as you did.
Yeah, like you didn't fail, you were just overwhelmed. Like that's not.
I feel like their relationship though is so much like those bad one-sided like friendships that I've had with someone who was like into me and I wasn't into them, and how I'm always trying to make them feel better, and then that just makes them like me more, and then I'm like it's more awkward because I don't want anything to happen romantically, but I want to be a good friend, and it's so awkward.
Yeah, except that I think Philippa is like, she's not into Austen, obviously she doesn't love him, but I think she does actually want to encourage him, because I think she wants to get married and have kids, and like she doesn't see that happening with Lymond. She doesn't see that possibility. She's kind of said that can't happen. So I don't think she wants to go back to Flaws Valley and be a spinster forever. Flaw Valley, sorry.
I think that she probably intellectually thinks that she should entertain the thing with him, which I've had that experience too. But emotionally, she's so above him, and it's so unequal. Like she doesn't want it in her soul. Maybe she thinks she's trying to convince herself to want it in her brain, but she doesn't really want it.
Well, I'm not even sure she's thinking emotionally like that's a neat, like, because she talks about like marriage as a practice. It's not about falling deeply in love with someone new. It's about having a partnership and having kids and being finding a person that you can live with, that you don't hate, and that you can sort of survive happily with. And she won't have passion with them, but she could have a decent marriage, and maybe Austen will be that person. And it's like giving up on grand passion for practicality, which I think is super Philippa. Like she's so practical, and so she's kind of said, I can't have Lymond, so
yeah, but she's also like keeping her options open. Like she could really try to cement things with Austen, but she's still like entertaining other suitors. Like she's so not like, let's go with I really want to do this second option with Austen.
She is entertaining the other suitors, but I think Austin's the only one that she's seriously thought of if things don't work out the way I want them with Lymond. He's probably the best next option.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be her choice. Like, she's kind of casually mentioned other people, or other people have mentioned other people, but she seems to be pretty set on him in terms of conversation and what she tells other people and like how she treats him versus other people. Like, I don't think she's thinking about anybody else. I think she's thinking Lyman's gonna go away because he doesn't love me, and I'm gonna marry Austin. Like, that seems to be her plan.
It's very circumstantial. It's literally like Austin's around a lot, so I guess it'll be him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I think that's part of it, but it's just like, it's kind of like, well, I can't have what I want, so I might as well make the best of what's left. And he's what's left, you know?
I don't think there'd ever be the spark, though.
No.
Yeah, it would just be completely practical.
He's not good enough for her. But...
No, she's not like the ointment seller, or he's not like the ointment seller that came by and she would, buy the salves.
Right. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, right.
One of her crushes that she had before Lymond.
Right.
One of 3, I think.
Yeah, it is interesting that Lymond he tells her about the house in Paris and Isabel. And I wonder if he did that. Like, I wonder if he actually meant to do that, because it's just giving her more clues that she's gonna like latch onto. Like, of course she's not gonna let that go. And so
I suspect if he wasn't drunk, he would have not revealed that. And there's also a part in the next chapter where it's like he lets his guard down because he has assumed that she must be over her crush by now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, honey, no.
Well, that's a good question to actually bring us into the next chapter, is the state and level of Lymond's drunkenness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is he pretending to be drunk? And I mean, he's drunk a little bit, definitely. But even in the next chapter, Strozzi's like, oh, he's not nearly as drunk as he seems. I learned that trick when we were in Calais. So.
Well, yeah, and when he realizes that the pages or whatever the wait servers are children, and suddenly he like sobers up and wants to protect them, and Philip is like, "Oh, he isn't drunk."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we definitely know he drinks enough to get sick at the end of the last.
But I also wonder how much of that is his headache. Like, is because it's definitely like it's obviously getting worse and worse and worse. Like, all of that migraine stuff is back throughout these 2 chapters, and so I kind of wondered how much of it was him getting drunk and how much of it was just the pressure slowly starting to build.
I think it's probably a mixture of both.
I don't think the migraine starts until Marta does her, like, kiss her.
Yeah.
Before that, he's just he's just drinking more and more, and he actually is drunk by the end because they're still drinking when they go to Jarrett's. So I think in the lead up to the dinner or the banquet, he's acting more drunk than he is, and at the banquet he's acting more drunk than he is, but he's still drinking, and by the time they get to Jarrett's and they're drinking, I think he is actually wasted. And then when Marta does her thing, I think that's when he goes outside in the cold and throws up and the headache comes, and
All right, well, since we're in chapter 2, let me just recap it really quickly. I didn't really take a lot of notes because I had a lot of trouble comprehending what was happening. But chapter 2 opens and disaster is imminent. The whole next couple of things that happen are all a mess, starting from when the king tries to exit his carriage and falls flat on his butt because the horses sort of start moving too soon. They go to this, it's a party being thrown for the victors of Calais, an ancient or an antique triumph. I forget exactly what they call it, but clearly the hotel that they're in does not have enough room and was very underprepared. They tried to throw this thing together rather quickly, and it's just a mess. Seriously overcrowded. They're borrowing silver and crystal and plates from people. The decorations aren't even dry yet. They've got children to do the serving. People are dropping food, and then the room is so overcrowded, and then these performers try and come in and they have no room to do everything. it's just a mess, and we'll talk about it. So that ends at midnight, and then they go back to the hotel where Jarrett and Martha are. They are having a bunch of fun together. There's this really lovely, frivolous sense of what's happening. And like even Jarrett, who we know does not perceive things very well, can clearly see what is happening with Philippa's interest in Lymond. Austin Gray, we can also assume, is seeing the exact same things. And that's when Marta steps up and decides to ruin the fun by trying to get them to kiss each other, or more likely for Lymond to kiss Philippa. And then the family squabble of all family squabbles starts, ending with sort of Marta standing in the way, trying not to let either of them leave. And that's when Lymond throws out, oh, let's compare notes on Guzel's naked body. So he lets that sort of out in the open, and then him and Philippa leave. Lymond can't be found for a while, so eventually Jarrett goes out to look for him in the rain, and Lymond has been sick, and that's when Archie Abernathy shows up and says, oh, by the way, some ships sank, and one of them was carrying your mother and Richard, so they're probably dead. Yay. Not great news. But also not news that I believed at all. So
yeah, no. That was obviously not true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very soap opera.
Yeah.
So I learned this when I was in Paris. Hotel de Ville is like the seat of city government or the city hall. So it's not actually a hotel, it's like a government building. So basically it's like a government building that's too small for the amount of people they've invited, and also they only had like a few days, and actually it wasn't their idea, right? It was like the king invited himself.
So the French don't use that word hotel, I think, in the same way that we do, because a lot of the buildings in Paris are called the Hotel de
House of, is it maybe house
Nope.
of government, Hotel de
Could be.
Ville?
Yeah.
I don't speak any French, but
because
yeah,
they called it the Hotel de Gautier in Lyon, and it was not an actual place that people could stay.
right, just the house of Gautier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like the banquet. I mean, I like that she kicks it off with like the king steps out, they start the blasting loud music, it causes the horses to rear, so then the king falls over. Which is the like everything about this event is done badly, and I don't know, it just cracks me up because it reminds me how hard it is to pull off a good event, and when you pull it off well, nobody notices, it's seamless. But when you don't pull it off, everyone notices and everyone's miserable.
I have worked events like this, maybe not quite on the level of disaster that this was, but I have worked events where nothing goes right. So
well, never mind, because we all are into immersive theater, and it's like, you know, when it's bad, because it's like all this kind of stuff, they miss that, and it just cascades. And really, like, you got to think through every little thing and the impression it gives and the way that it'll work, just the way that, like, you know, the servers can't get through because people are standing because they haven't gotten their wine yet, and then like this dessert goes to this table and all of that dessert goes to the other table. It's just everything about it is it's just funny, and feel bad for the people who organized it.
It's just too hastily prepared. This should have been an event that was like weeks in the making. So
yeah, I think part of this is just due to like there are a lot of things that are comedic and written comedically that I deeply don't find funny. Like I really hate them. And it's things like this where there's a disaster, where people are embarrassed, where things don't go right. And when stuff like that's written for comedy, like I just am deeply uncomfortable. And so like any movie like that, where like movies that have like characters are sort of mocked through the movie, like I just hate it. And so like I found this whole banquet scene just to be miserable from start to finish. Like every single thing that happened, I was just like, oh no, that's terrible, oh that's terrible, oh those poor people. Like, and that's all I could think through the whole thing. And so I actually it was not funny. I mean, from the moment the king fell, it was just like, oh, this is going to be bad. And it was just bad the whole way through. And then even just Philippa and Lymond like trying to save it and failing in many ways, and just because I just felt like I would be trying to do that. Like I would be trying like, oh no, we can help, we can do this, and it's just not going to work. And it's just and then the reason I think his headache's actually coming back earlier is because of the noise and the chaos of all this. Like even a regular person without any migraine tendencies, like the amount of screaming they're doing and the amount of noise and banging and artillery going off and bells, like everyone in this building has a headache. Like I can't imagine that anyone's gotten through it without that. So for someone who has migraine tendencies, like I think his headache tension has started way before the family stuff, because it's just, and then it turns into a super horrible headache where he gets sick. But yeah, this is just miserable. And then when it's finally over, they kind of have a euphoric funny time at home where everyone's laughing, and that's great. But it seems like almost a relief from this horrible banquet.
I don't know, but throughout the entire banquet, Lymond is laughing and suppressing his laughter. Crimson with suppressed laughter. He hides under the table because he's laughing so hard that wouldn't be able to show his face again if people saw him. Like, that's not what you do when you have a headache. That's what you do when you just can't get over how funny something is.
Yeah. It just still read as miserable to me. Like, because you can laugh when things are, you can laugh from hysteria. Like, I mean, maybe he found it funny, but ugh.
I think he did find it funny, but I agree. I think this could be the precursor. Like all the noise and all the happenings may have sort of overloaded his senses for a bit and started what progresses further when the stress comes out in the fight.
Yeah, it's definitely a sensory overload, but I think he's got this release of laughter throughout this. It's not until Marta pushes Philip at him that it turns into a headache, in my opinion. Just because again, he keeps like he just keeps cracking up. And he and Piero are having fun, and like I know I get you don't find it funny, but like the completely incompetent performance, they all find it hilarious, and Lymond and Philippa find it so funny that they reenact the whole thing afterward. So they're there's like a awkward vicarious embarrassment, but there's also like they find it hilarious.
I didn't get the sense that it was
super
bad performance. It was just that they didn't have the space, and the concessions that they had to make to sort of get around is what ended up being so funny.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not the performer's fault, but it's like everything about it is wrong. That they didn't have time to rehearse. Obviously, the staging doesn't work. You can't hear the singer talking. The costumes are falling apart. The one thing like was translated or written wrong, so they have like the wrong props. Just like everything about it is wrong. It's like the worst.
The actors forgets their lines.
We can't quite figure out what story it is. But that was a funny bit where they're arguing about like what's the story they're telling, and they're like, no, it's this one because they have this. It's like, no, wait, it's that. Yeah.
And Lymond's trying to read the lips of the singer to figure out what's being said. Mm-hmm. Bad lip reading.
Well, and then they the realization that the silver and crystal is Strozzi's and Lymond's, and the way Strozzi's like super angry, like they stole my silver, and Philip is like, no, I lent it because they didn't have any and they needed help.
Her line about the Conde Sevigny had protected the walls of their city, they were willing to entrust me with their pride. Like I think that's part of what just made this so sad, is like these people really tried to make something beautiful and like worthy of the king, and it just failed 100%. And so it's super embarrassing, and they had this, yeah, you just feel for like whoever's the mayor of the town or whatever it is they're putting it on. Like it just didn't work.
So apparently this was a real historical event that was a legendarily bad banquet.
Oh gosh.
There's also a part where Lymond tries to cheer up one of the little serving children, and Strozzi goes, his mouth drops open, and he goes, "Of course, you have a son, don't." And then he roared, "I beg your pardon, my foot slipped," said Philippa. "Have a date plan and don't talk so much."
Yeah. Like,
I
Yes.
feel like that's probably not the only time she had to kick him under the table. She did warn him. She told him she was going to do it at the beginning. If you laugh, I shall kick you.
Yeah, Strozzi's not that aware of what's going on.
Well, and Strozzi doesn't know not to mention child. And Philip is trying to protect Lymond's mood. But I mean, basically throughout, Lymond and Philip are joking and laughing and bantering off of each other. And we're even told at the beginning the only reason Lymond lets this happen is because he lets himself think that her crush she must have gotten over it by now. And then the end of it is literally even Philippa can't keep her laughter in. Strozzi goes under the table. Lymond and Philippa exploded together, meaning into laughter, and then he slides under the table, and she's stuck there trying to keep a straight face.
It's a clever counterpoint to the last sort of moment of bonding, because that also took place in a house of revels. So there's this theatricality to it, where that was sort of the beginning of Philippa's. No, that's when Lymond realized what he felt for Philippa. And here we have a similar moment, but in a different fashion. So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's basically a setup for the two of them to then do a reenactment of the terrible performance and for them to just like spark off of each other in a way that everyone can see.
Yeah. That was fun. The next bit in the house.
I love the banquet too. I'll just put in my good word for it. I'm not vicariously embarrassed. The people who ran it, I'm sure they recovered.
No, I get Dee's feeling on that, because I feel the same way. Like, embarrassment comedy makes me feel very uneasy.
Yeah, I just can't do it. It doesn't mean other people don't find it funny. Like, that's fine. Lots of people love Dumb and Dumber. I hate it. Like, you know.
I can't watch Meet the Parents because I feel so terrible for Ben Stiller's character.
It's not the embarrassment comedy that I find funny. It's Lymond and Philippa's banter about it that's funny.
Yeah.
So they do make it back to the hotel where revelry and drinking begins anew. And I think it's just so clearly obvious in this moment how into Lymond Philippa is that even Jarrett sees it happening. So it must be very apparent to everybody in the room that's not completely drunk off their butts. And sort of Austin just kind of stands obscures in the shadows, watching in silence. It's like he knows what's happening too.
Well, and Jarrett is particularly attuned to this probably more than most things because of his long experience of it himself.
Yeah, I mean, there's this quote from Jarrett that's so good where he says, the knowledge that one had his total friendship, but never the key to the inmost door. And there was an inmost door, which Marta did not have and had never had, although his hopes of that and that alone had been his reason for marrying her. She's like, poor Jarrett.
Do you think that that's true about Marta?
No, I don't think that's true. But
that's the door.
Yeah, his whole she doesn't deserve the torment to lifetime of waiting in return for a handful of moments of ecstasy, and it's like, Jarrett, you're projecting, my friend.
Absolutely.
He knew how it turned you to water, that unguessed at well of delight under the bitter intelligence. Like, yes. And then he's like, blah blah blah, Marta, and we're like, you know what it's like, and it's not because of Marta.
Yeah. But you do get the sense that he wants Marta's love, and he wants like those, like those two aren't exclusive. So he does feel this way about Marta, and he is deeply disappointed that he's not there. But I think it seems like he's kind of given up on her, and I think she does have an inner door or whatever. He just hasn't unlocked it.
Hasn't he asked her or sort of apologized to her and told her that he's going to leave her the night before? I may have misread that part.
Yeah, pretty much. He's
Like,
like, I'm,
I
I'm
do love you, but I've decided that I'm a soldier now, and like they need me more.
yeah.
And that happens later in his memory. So
I tend to think like a big part of Jarrett's struggle is he's trying to divert his attachment to Lymond to be on Marta instead, but like he keeps kind of going back to Lymond because that's who he really wants. And it's like partly successful because he wants Marta too, but I think she can see right through it. I mean, she flat out says, "You only want me because you actually want my brother. You think you want me. You want my brother." And so I think he's torn between the two, and he's super repressed and unable to admit it to himself. And she sees it, so she can't trust his love because she knows that he's started with her brother and would choose her brother over her, which is exactly what he does here.
Yep. Jarrett.
yeah.
And then we have
read that Captive Prince. I need to read that Captive Prince fanfic of Lymond stuff.
Next.
It's it's nowhere near as good as this, but it's definitely a Lymond Jarrett fanfic turned into an original fic with the name changed.
Yeah.
So I think we have in this chapter, and then we have also in the next chapter, the Lymond's defense mechanism of tearing to shreds the person who's threatening him emotionally, which he turns on Marta in this case. So we had actually talked about her relationship with Guzel in Pawn, which is hinted at in Pawn, but it's like really, really subtle. I don't think you guys picked up on it until I said something. But it finally like comes to light here where Lymond reveals it. And it's obviously true because Marta like freaks out in response. There's also the line here right after he says, "I'm going to describe Guzel's naked body and call upon you for corroboration." A woman sniggered. Who's the woman?
Well, it's only Marta or Philippa. They're the only two.
There are any other women in the room.
Unless it was the Dame de Dutons in spiritual form.
I'm pretty sure we're supposed to think it was the Dame de Dutons.
Oh, really?
Because it wouldn't be Philippa and it wouldn't be Marta. Yeah. They're both like devastated and run away.
Yeah. I thought that was a weird line. I was like, what? Because I assumed I was like, I guess it's Philippa, but it doesn't seem like it would be her. She wouldn't do that, and it's a really odd timing. So I totally forgot there are ghosts in the book.
There's also like, I mean, obviously this oh, it's so scandalous, lesbian relationships thing that like doesn't translate now because lesbian relationships aren't scandalous to any of us. That like it gives this whole scene this like emotional weight that is like not there as much to a modern reader. Like it's the sniggering about Marta's attachment. Like, why would you laugh about that?
Yeah. Or this where Marta says, you didn't think Kate or Jarrett ever doubted the lady's chastity. She had observed sardonically. They were terrified, my gallant friend, in case you or she fell in love with one another. And it's just like that. I mean, basically, she's just outright saying, my husband's in love with you, with Lymond, and so is your mother, which, I mean, people knew, I think, but to say it out loud in company is like, how drunk is Marta?
She doesn't have much of a filter, does she?
Oh.
And like, she's just blunt about it because I think she genuinely means well when she's like being like, come be merry, kiss her. Like I don't think she's coming from a place of anger or loathing in this moment. She genuinely wants the two of them to be together. But then she just pushes it too hard.
She pushes it so far.
Well, again, I think we can look back at the way she was raised and the lack of healthy relationships to see why she super struggles in these kind of situations.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not that she doesn't have an innermost door, so she doesn't know how to express it.
Or she doesn't know how to unlock it, like if there's a door to her inmost whatever, like maybe she doesn't have the key, so she can't, nobody else can have it either, that whole idea that it's hard to have a healthy relationship if you don't have a healthy concept of yourself, if you don't have a healthy sense of yourself, and she doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Not that Lyman has a healthy sense of himself either, but
that's true, but he doesn't have a healthy relationship. So like maybe we'll get there.
any other thoughts on that stuff while they're in the house before we then go outside to the fountain?
I found midway through page 317, when Marta is sort of talking about them being together, she actually sort of admits that part of the whole Dame de Dutantes thing was an act. When she says, then take her home and see if I'm right or not. Her voice thickened. Remember me, she said, the marriage will stand. So like she's admitting that she wasn't taken over by the spirit the whole time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if any of them believed she was wholly taken over by the spirit.
Yeah.
I think Jarrett just thought it was all her.
I think the only point that I still doubt in that is when she says the prophecy about burning. I forget exactly what that prophecy was, but something will burn, something will drown or flood. Oh, hey, something did drown, although it didn't. I don't know. I have to read the prophecy again.
Yeah, I think you can read it as the deeper voice is the Dom and the lighter voice is Marta, but it depends how far you want to go with the supernatural stuff.
Right.
I do like Philippa's coming to Marta, and just it says Philippa stepped forward and thrust her hands in the tightly clenched hands of Lyman's sister and spoke to her. It's too late. It will punish all the wrong people. Come with me, leave him. Just this give up. It's not, and it's almost like Philippa is kind of like Philippa knows what she's doing, and it's just like it's too late. Give it up. And just like, oh.
Well, and she's kind in trying to end this disaster.
Yeah.
So when they go outside, I think it's an interesting reflection on the banquet that it had been such an insult to all the people that worked to get Calais back, because it was just all about watching the Duke de Guise take credit for everybody else's work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we're in Jarrett's point of view, and thinking about his joy and liberation after these huckstering years to be again under the hand of this man, his arts at their meridian. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the text here about that is indicative of Jarrett's feelings for Lymond having not gone away. And I think if we look at 320, when he's looking at Lymond on the fountain, one, her descriptions here are just so beautiful and vivid about how it's dark and he's searching through all these like stables, and then finally he sees this hint of someone at the fountain, and he's like, they've all been on suicide watch, and this is the first time Lymond's been alone for a while, so this moment of panic.
Especially after the fight that just happened.
Yeah. But the way that Jarrett sees the line of wide brow and closed lid and turned cheekbone, whose twin he saw night after night on his pillow. So the way that Jarrett sees Lymond as the twin of the woman he married, and it's just like very explicit in comparison. And then the way that he's watching Lymond, and all these descriptions are like very, we're in Jarrett's point of view, and he's seeing Lymond the way he would see someone he's attracted to. He's looking at his hair and his hands and the way he's breathing. Beneath his hands, his lips were parted. It's just very like his lids were fringed like a girl's. His tapering fingers without defenses lay within touching distance. Jarrett Blythe, rising to his knees and then to his feet, said, "Come quickly, I can get you a woman." So he's looking at his beautiful eyelashes and thinking about how his hands are in touching distance, and then he's like, standing up, no, I'll get you a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, but doesn't he see here? So when it says Lymond dropped his hands, he made no protest. He did not look up. But unimpeded at last, Jarrett could see the look on his face and give it sickeningly its correct interpretation. "Oh, God in heaven," said Jarrett Blythe, "you bloody arrogant fool." He sat back suddenly. So, like, is this Jarrett realizing that Lymond does like Philippa? Like, that's how I read it, because he says, you ought to know you're not a priest, you fight, etc.
I don't know if he's really not realizing that Lymond. He's certainly not realizing that Lymond's in love with Philippa, but he's, I think, realizing that Lymond is sexually into, like, he wants to have sex right now, right? Because it's all about, if you need a woman, I'll find you a woman.
I mean, he could just offer himself.
Well, I think that's what he's thinking, and then he's like, so he stands up.
Yeah. What was Piero's offer? I forgot. He says, "Why didn't you accept Piero's offer?"
Oh, did Piero offer him a woman at some point? I assume. I forget.
I was like, I don't remember that reference.
I think Piero was like, "Let's find a woman for you."
Oh.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah, and then Lyman's just like, "If you know of a woman, then go to her. What I want, I can find for myself." But will he? No.
Well, and then he says, "Send for Archie," and Archie shows up. So he's definitely got the headache at this point. And I love how Archie,
he was kind of just there. I think Archie's already been sort of out looking for him.
Yeah, definitely.
well, he's cloaked and half dressed as when he had been roused at the Hotel San Andre. So I think he just got the message and he's come to the message, because the message is an urgent message. So I don't think he's been there. I think he just got there because he's got to give this urgent message. But I do like how Archie shows up and asks what's amiss, and Lyman's like, "I've just been drinking and I threw up, but it's fine." And Archie's like, "Is that true?" He does not believe Lyman for a second. He's checking with Jarrett.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and then we get sad news, which is not true.
Well, and Archie's quite, it's interesting that Archie's so observant, because he's like, this is the one time we don't need to be on suicide watch, because if his family really died, he's gonna feel this sense of obligation. Similar as the night he tried to kill himself, it was the next morning that suddenly he became the only man who could save France, and so he pulled himself together.
So he goes off on this ride.
Yeah, any other thoughts on chapter 2 then, though, before we move on to 3?
I do think there was one more comment that I appreciated about where Philippa said at the top of 318. So this is after she's kind of told Marta that just let it go. It's too late. And she says, when Marta doesn't give up on it, she's like, "Stop it. None of you knows what you're doing. Be quiet. If nothing will end it but someone's pride being broken, then as usual, it had better be mine." And then she tells Lyman basically to kiss her. And she's like, "Fine, I'll be the one who suffers." And I just took that again as her, like, it's better if this ends, so I'll just sacrifice myself and let the bad thing happen.
There's Philippa and Lyman having another thing in common.
Yep. Yeah.
It's true.
So. And just that idea that like her pride gets broken a lot is sad. But true.
So, chapter 3. All right. Lymond is in a state. He's just been sick. He just got this news. He really doesn't want to rest at all, but he ends up sleeping for about 30 minutes while Archie prepares everything. And Archie and Lymond are going to travel alone to Dieppe. It's a grueling 6-hour ride. He's not feeling well. He's really pushing the horses to their limits. You can tell that he is actually really worried that Mama and Bro are both dead. So he does finally get to Dieppe and finds out that yes, Sibylla is alive, but none of the men were saved except for the Earl and like a couple other, but no barons, which is important because we find out later that Richard is now an Earl, but Lymond doesn't know that, and that hasn't been sort of told to him. So he goes into the room to meet Sibylla, thinking that Richard is dead. And she doesn't correct him right away. And she sort of uses this as a moment to try and pull out the truth. Why are you staying away from me? Like, come back, help Marietta and the kids at Midcoulter. I will exile myself. I will leave. And she's really close, I think she thinks, to getting this information when Richard actually does show up. And Sibylla is angry at that. And Lymond is even angrier because Sibylla let him believe that Richard was actually dead. But then he and Richard end up screaming at each other a lot, and Sibylla is trying to stop it. And we'll talk much more in depth about that. So Lymond actually ends up leaving. That's when he discovers that Richard is an Earl now. And the people of the town of Dieppe are really happy that he's there because he's this hero of Calais and they're celebrating him. And they give him this horse and he rides the horse through town, and he's very sick and blind. I think that's how bad the headaches have gotten. And he ends up getting to James Stewart, who is the brother of the Queen Dowager. Is that correct?
The brother of the Queen, right? No, the Queen Dowager.
He's somebody's
brother. It's James the First, right? That's who this is. Who's going to end up being the King of Scotland and England later.
Oh, right? I didn't.
No, that's not. That's Mary Queen of Scots' son.
Oh, you're right.
Hmm.
This is the Scots Queen's half brother, so it's Marie de Guise's child, but not with the same. Oh no, sorry, he's a Stuart, so it's not Marie de Guise. It's
maybe he's like the illegitimate son of the king.
It must be an illegitimate son of.
I got confused. I was thinking it was James the First, but yeah, you're totally right. He hasn't been born yet.
Yeah, I wasn't sure who it was. We can figure that out later. But basically, he gets there, and the horse ride has been terrible, and he's sick, and I think he's blind, and then he passes out.
I don't know if he's blind though, because he recognizes we're in his point of view, and he recognizes James Stewart. And he recognizes the church he's in.
Well, if not completely blind, at least very disoriented, because I found that a lot of the description of this passage wasn't using vision words. It was all about his other senses, what he smelled, what he was hearing, and just other things that could be construed that his vision faculty wasn't completely there.
Well, I think it's also that those things make you sick when you have a migraine. So anything loud, anything bright, anything with a strong smell is likely to make you throw up.
Lots of fish scent throughout this whole scene. Yeah. And even from the beginning, when he first goes back into the hotel, that overwhelming smell of Marta's, the scent that she uses and the scent that they brought back from the party. So lots of overwhelming sensory overload issues throughout this chapter.
I have the answer here to James Stewart. Let me share.
Okay.
Hold on. Show my screen.
So many Jameses, so many Stewarts.
All right. So this is the Mary Queen of Scots.
This is helpful.
tree. So this is actually quite relevant, right? Because we were talking about there's the Duke de Guise, there's the Cardinal of Lorraine, his younger brother, and then there's Marie de Guise, who's Mary's mother.
Okay.
And then her father was James V of Scotland. Her half brother James is not on here, which makes sense because he's illegitimate. But if you go to her father, which is James V, and you look at his children, there's James First Earl of Moray, illegitimate son of James V. So this guy is the one that Lymond is meeting with.
And so he becomes regent for James the fifth. No, wait, James the sixth / first.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, he's much younger in this than, I guess, in this portrait.
Cool.
Okay.
Now we know.
Did it just say his mother was Catherine of Leon? Because that's interesting. Just as you clicked it off is what I thought I read.
His mother,
this guy's mother was Lady Margaret Erskine.
What?
Which can't be our Margaret Erskine.
No, that's got to be someone else.
Maybe someone else, yeah. Illegitimate child, born in 1531. So this was a previous generation of Erskines. And probably her, she was, her maiden name is Erskine. So she's not married into Erskines like our Margaret Erskine. She's actually a child of John Erskine, the fifth Lord Erskine. But yeah.
I do like that Tom Erskine is mentioned in this chapter. Another sort of callback to things that have happened previously.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Really,
go ahead.
I was just saying that really sad mention of Dickon as well.
Yeah.
No, I love that we go to the house of Jean Angot. And Lymond's even remembering here was the wall he had once swung over, masked on a summer night. And there, gleaming through the bare trees, the fountains and statues, because that's his intro as Lymond in Queen's Play. After we met Toddy Boy, we meet Lymond in all black and in a mask, swinging over Clotho's distaff.
Yeah,
and that's the statues that are referred to here. And this is like a real house. I can't remember if you can still go there, but yeah, I love that. Like she keeps going back to her greatest hits. And then we get his thoughts on Queen's Play, which is masterless and directionless after the harsh years of outlawry. He had celebrated his freedom 6 years ago in ways he preferred not to remember.
I'm sure he doesn't remember most of it, or a lot of it.
Oh, poor Teddy Boy.
He had some fun, though.
There's another line where he brings up Dangan, which is just kind of horrible the way he brings it up, and then he's talking to Richard, so.
Yeah, what does he say?
Something about Philippa. He's like, well, who should I go for other than Philippa now that Dangan's dead?
Yeah.
Dangan, however you pronounce that name.
Yes. Yeah. I haven't consummated it yet, but now Dangan's dead. I may be driven to it.
You're like, oh man.
He's doing exactly what Marta does, pulls out the absolute worst. There's a line that Jarrett has in the previous chapter about like he had not yet learned how to wound without blows the way that Marta and Lymond do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's because Marta just kind of dismisses him when he's like, I decided I'm a good soldier. She's like, well, you better tell the army that. Have you told the army that yet?
Yeah.
Which is biting. And he just lets it pass because, as you said, he doesn't know how to wound with words quite as well.
Yeah, I mean, because he's Jarrett, his like instinct is just like to like punch, to wound physically. He really would be a much more, I think, effective person if he could learn how to like defend himself with his mouth instead of his fists.
Yeah.
So also notable about this whole sequence is it's another one of the longest sequences of Lymond's point of view. Like we're getting more and more of these long Lymond point of view sequences, which we did not get in the earlier books. And this whole thing would have been a completely different scene if it was not in his point of view.
Mhm. Yeah.
I love the point of view that he has on 325, where he's thinking about friendships and he's thinking about Richard. And it's almost most of the way down the page. He had thought sometimes to recognize the same affinity with Richard, but circumstances and he supposed his own nature were always against it. And of the women, 2 had died and he had cut himself off from the other. So that's a callback to Christian and Una and Philippa.
Yeah. It's also an interesting, like that idea that Dickon was becoming a friend, the kind of friend that he'd never quite managed to find and keep. And that, you just get this sense that Lymond has always longed to have relationships with people who are his peers, and that he could genuinely be loyal to and genuinely care about, and they would care about him, but he's just never been able to do it.
Well, then when you look back on his relationships with people like Will Scott and with Jared and Liam Rowe, the idea that he's really tried, but like he's never, it's so rare to find people that can meet him on his level.
Yeah. And they die. Like, I mean, like you get the sense like Will Scott, like if Will Scott had lived, he would have become, like, as he grew and matured and learned, and Lymond was in his life for the next 20 years or whatever, like he would have become that kind of friend, and Dickon would have become that kind of friend.
I think the same could be said about Tom. I think he and Tom would have really grown close had Tom not gotten sick and died.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom was an interesting one because they had so little in common, but they were equals in like ways
they respected each other. Yeah. Yeah.
I really like Lymond's point of view on that scene with Richard, where it says he had been as careful as he knew how to be, but it had not been enough because he too had been hurt by a loss he could afford less than Richard. Because you can see it in that scene, like he really, really is trying, and he just, like, that's where he almost tells him about Kyreddin. Like he really was trying. He's just too much of a mess. And the words Dunnett uses, like the sand under their feet, all the muddled solicitude which had prompted that journey had in 5 minutes dispersed through their fingers. And it's just that feeling of like lost opportunity and just this constant feeling that you get again in this chapter of like these people all love each other so much and yet they just keep messing it up. It keeps slipping through their fingers.
Yeah.
So what's your take on Sibylla and her lying? She lets Lymond think Richard is dead.
Again, I needed a nap after this chapter. Like, it was just dumb. Like, and I don't think of her as dumb when it comes to her son. Like, she has in the past been insightful and has actually handled him well and has known what to do. But this was just the completely wrong thing to do. Like I mean, even if it had been successful, even if she had found out what she wanted to know and he had told her what she wanted to know, there's no way he wouldn't have been absolutely furious with her at the end. Like, even if Richard had come in later or she had told him, oh, by the way, Richard's not dead, even if that had happened later, like he would have been very justifiably furious. And yeah, this is just, I think it was just a case of her seeing an opportunity and like, oh, I can find this out, and then taking it, but not thinking through what it would actually mean.
I think she didn't realize that he was planning to be civil with her and Richard. I think she's like, oh, he's only here because he thinks Richard's dead, and as soon as he finds out Richard's alive, he'll leave. It's still a terrible, terrible idea, but I assume that must be what's going on with her. Like, she just thinks that that's the only chance to get him to stay and have a breakthrough.
You just get the sense, I just wish she wouldn't have tried to manipulate him in this way at all. It's I mean, things are already fraught with peril, their relationship. I don't understand how she could have thought this would make things better.
Yeah. I mean, she has just
out in this manner.
She did almost drown. So
yeah.
Like there is a possibility that she's just not her best self and she's not thinking clearly, and so she makes.
Well, and she's lost 25 people that she are part of her household that she's grown up with or that have grown up with her. So she's in this deep mourning, and it's very telling as well when he asks about what's going on. She talks about those 25 people, not about Richard, because she really is in mourning for those people. But yeah, it's the worst thing to do also because he's like freaking out because he feels betrayed. And then here she is betraying him again. He even says, "Oh, can you not stop? Can you not stop even now?" It's this feeling that he's been lied to again, misled again.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not a straight out lie. It's not like she said Richard is dead. She just discovered that that's what he thought and went with it.
I mean, as far as we know, she never sat him down and said, "Gavin's your father." She just let him believe it because everyone acted like it.
Which is true.
The same effect anyway.
Yeah.
She has to get the sense that that is why he's so mad at her, especially once he says like the stuff about Renee Jorda and Isabel. It's like, and then the master of that house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, there's also a reference to his migraine where on 332, it's a really sort of beautiful way to say it, but it says, the room became a mosaic, then a dazzlement of grained light and shade like water-run taffeta. He bore down hard on the hutch table. So you can just see like he's getting that light star effect from the migraine that, you know, light is shattering and
Yeah, I think that's an interesting line because it could be the migraine or it could be his eyes filling with tears or it could be both. But either way, it's an emotional reaction to her line about if I were not there, would you go back to mid-Coulter? Thinking about mid-Coulter without his mom there. And yeah, and then right after that is the line, she was the only person, ... almost the only person who could manipulate him like this. Because now Philippa has the power to, she just doesn't know it.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of, I think, interesting stuff. Just going back a little bit also is the line that opens this section, put him blindfold into a closed room anywhere in the world, and he could tell if Sibylla was with him. It had to do perhaps with her scent. To him, it was more a breath from the sweetness and peace of his childhood, a sense of light, of understanding, of loving amusement, an air from the flower-filled walls of Paradisa. And I feel like that's a direct echo of the end of Game of Kings, where he's been through so much, and then at the very end he goes into that room with his mother, and like the door closes even on the reader because it's so private what's between the two of them, but it's, you know, it's like the comfort that he's needed for so long. And it's like here it's like he's almost got it, but he can't have that comfort again, right? Nothing even now took from him that first moment until the second moment came, and with it his years and his memory. Even that comfort he can't have anymore. It's very like, no wonder it's so devastating to him when that was like the only, you know, light in his otherwise terrible childhood.
Yeah. It's so sad.
And he goes into this with like the best of intentions, right? Of the three children Sibylla had reared, he was the only one living. This time, whatever one's instincts might be, one did not turn on one's heel and walk past her. Like, he's really, really trying, and then it all falls apart.
Yeah.
All fine until Richard walked in. I mean, it wasn't, but
he says, I owe the Coulter family a debt, which I think also tells us that he doesn't, like, that's like the root of his issue. He doesn't feel like he's part of this family anymore. Like, it is, going back to the Untamed, it is the exact same thing of like, I was adopted into this family, but I'm not really part of this family, and I owe this family, versus like feeling like you're actually part of the family. I also highlighted the bit where he says Russia doesn't mean more to him than mid-culture, and a smile illumined her face as if he, a child again, had brought her some great achievement. So she's really trying to have this breakthrough with him, starting to get there. And I think because we're in his point of view, when she asks him why, um, he's about to say it. He actually thinks in return he owed her nothing but perhaps an act of generosity, a glimpse of the private motives behind his refusal. He drew breath to answer her, and that's when Richard
Right.
comes in. So he's about to say something really revealing.
Yeah.
What do you think he's going to say?
I think he's going to tell her about what he knows and what he learned and why he's angry and why he feels like he doesn't belong. And yeah.
Is he going to tell her about Philippa? Is he going to tell her about Kyreden?
No, I think he's going to tell her about his relationship with her, like what he's learned and why their relationship is tense. Because that's the part she wants to know, really. I mean, the Kyreden stuff and the Philippa stuff is important, and he does need to tell his mother those things, but that's not why their relationship is strained.
Yeah, he's got to fix their relationship before he
Yeah.
can get advice on his other issues.
Right. He's got to tell her about why their relationship is having problems first, which is what I think he was going to tell her.
Well, Mom, I don't think you're actually my mom.
Yeah. But she says, if I were not there, what could still stand between you and Scotland? So I think he's going to tell her what's keeping him away from Scotland aside from her. I think she already knows what's keeping him away from her.
Then why doesn't she just tell him what's going on?
They have to talk about it first. Like, that's the thing that has to happen. It's, if they talk about everything else but not each other, their relationship will never be anything. Like, they have to talk about that first.
Well, I agree, but I don't think that's what he's about to tell her, because she literally asks, if I were not there, what could still stand between you and Scotland?
The fact that I'm raising someone else's son. Or, well, I'm not raising, but Kate is.
Yeah, and the fact that I'm bad for Philippa and I need to stay far away from her.
I mean, maybe, but that's assuming he's going to answer the question she asked, which people don't always do that. So I think, is that really what she wants to know? And perhaps he's asking the question, perhaps he's going to answer the question she really wants to know, which is, I think, what has happened to their relationship. Like, that's the heart of her pain and her, what she's wanting from him.
But what doesn't she know? I mean, she already knows that he knows about Isabel and whatever. Like, he already.
They haven't talked about it. Like, it doesn't matter if she knows it intellectually and he knows it intellectually until he tells her how he feels. It's never going to be resolved. It's never going to be healthy. The relationship is going to be strained. It doesn't matter what she intellectually knows or what he intellectually knows. They have to talk about it. Like, she can't. And I don't think she doesn't know how he feels. She doesn't know exactly what he knows. She doesn't know his anger or his pain. Like, she can guess, but she doesn't know. Yeah.
I think in the text, because the question is, if I were not there, what could still stand between you and Scotland? And then in his thoughts, he's thinking of showing her a glimpse, if nothing more, of the other private motives behind his refusal. I don't know that even here he's going to tell her emotionally what he thinks about her. Maybe he is. Maybe he's going to be like, I feel like I'm not part of the family anymore.
Yeah. Because, I mean, isn't that the key thing that's standing between him and Scotland? Like, even if she's not there, it's the fact that he doesn't belong there that's keeping him from Scotland. Like, if he and Philippa had the perfect relationship and he and Kazum had a great relationship as a foster parent or whatever, why wouldn't he go to Flaw Valleys? Which I said correctly. Why would he go to Scotland? Like, it's the fact that he doesn't belong in Scotland that's keeping him from Scotland. It's, yeah. Like, so even if she's not there, it's still the fact that he's not a coulter that's keeping him from Scotland.
I think it's three things, though. I think it's that. I think it's the trauma of being near that child, and I think it's the feelings for Philippa and the belief that he needs to protect Philippa from himself.
I guess so, but I don't know. I think that all those two things are also keeping him from England, but not like let's say he fixes his relationship with Philippa, and he fixes his feelings of his guilt about his son and Kazum. Does he go back to Scotland? Like, is that what happens?
Well, he can't go to England because they would, see him as an enemy.
Yeah, but they can stay in France. Like, why does he go back to Scotland? If he doesn't feel like he belongs in Scotland, if he's not a coulter, if that's not where he's from, like, I don't know. I guess I just don't see him going back to Scotland until that part of it is fixed. That even if everything else is perfect. I don't know.
I don't know. I think the fact that she keeps saying, like, if I leave, what's holding you? Like, she's trying to get to the, like, aside from me, what's the issue? But
yeah,
maybe it's like, regardless of you, I just don't belong there, or I'm not part of the family, or whatever.
Yeah.
What did you think of the little aside about the kitchen girl who stole some salt and cut her throat, and that
was.
Yeah, I don't know why that's there.
I think that was part of the melodrama you were talking about earlier. Like, it was so dramatic.
I actually really like that because we're in Lymond's point of view, and it's Lymond having this memory that seems random and out of context, but it tells us what's going on with him. It tells us a lot of what's going on with him in terms of, like, he's remembering back to mid-culture, and he's like, we know he's struggling with suicidal impulses, and so he remembers this thing that's like a subconscious suicidal impulse in himself, but he thinks of it in a way that he's thinking about someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how consciously aware he is of his own suicidal ideation, I guess, because of the way it comes through in this more, like, abstract form. But it certainly tells the reader that that's still an issue.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Sibylla says, I'll leave if you come back to Scotland. And he immediately thinks of this girl committing suicide. Like, it's super dramatic way to show it. But yeah, it just.
I mean, I think for him, like, her leaving would not solve any of his issues because it, what he needs is to resolve his issues with her. And so the thought of her, I mean, he even thinks it, to leave mid-culture for her meant leaving grandchildren, friends, servants, dependents, her home, possessions, blah, blah, blah. The soil of Scotland itself from which she drew all of her worldly and spiritual nourishment. And he says it would be a sacrifice to no purpose. Like, he doesn't want her to leave mid-culture, and he's really upset every time she says it. He doesn't want to do that to her, and he would be devastated by her not being there.
Yeah.
So I also super love on 334 when Richard comes in, and his first reaction to Richard, I think is just really lovely and beautiful, because he really thought Richard was dead. And so before he gets angry, his first reaction is just this, like, desperate love for his brother and the fact that his brother's alive. And he thinks of Richard, it was Richard alive, the guiding hand at one's pony, the voice at one's porridge bowl, the splendid athlete one watched from one's books in the cold tower window, while outside in the sunshine he rode at the ring, threw his spears, matched his sword with the master at arms, the brother who had cared for him, a grown man in illness, and defended him against calumny, and who at length, heartbroken at his defection, had turned his back on him a year ago in Scotland. And we can like also remember that Richard tried to kill him a bunch of times and like didn't stand by him. But what Lymond still remembers is like, but he always came through for me so many times and took care of me, and he really loves his brother.
Yeah. And then Richard's a dick. Like, he's really terrible in this scene.
But I mean, so if you think, I mean, this is why it's soap opera to me, because it's very like the whole thing is very constructed. Like Lymond only thinks that Richard's dead because of like false information, and then Richard is eavesdropping, but he only hears the part about Lymond going back to Marietta and mid-culture, which of course triggers all of Richard's worst instincts in relation to Lymond. So like the circumstances are manipulated by the writer to make it as extreme as it can be, and that's where I'm like a little melodrama.
Yeah, I agree. It was like everybody had the worst possible interpretation of everything in this scene. It was kind of like, there's a little bit of me that was like, these are adult people who like, and I know that that's true, that people are like this all the time, but it just felt a little bit of like, somebody needs to take a breath and just, so.
Well, and I feel like the other books were more restrained, like in a lot of the personal relationships, if not in the actual events. Like the whole Gabriel Lymond showdown was super over the top. Like if you look at the emotional beats in Disorderly Night, they're more realistic than the super melodrama of this. So then we have Lymond. He wanted to go while he was still master of himself before this primitive desire to devastate them both should overpower him. Best intentions, but that does not work. Destroyed all his own controls as they looked at him, and then he tears them both apart. As his typical Lymond defense mechanism. And we also have Richard above saying, a lifetime of desertion and you are still her favorite son. So just going back to that jealousy that we got at Game of Kings, where, like the root of their issues from Richard's perspective is feeling like Sibylla always loved Lymond more. And here he comes out and says it. And by the way, it's funny because there's a line Richard has in Queen's Play. It's like, I used to think that, but I don't have that problem anymore. And it's like, no, it's still there.
Yeah. I don't think so.
And then we have Lymond revealing to them that Philippa has a new passion for him. Hey, Lymond, what did you guys think about him?
Passion? Be quiet and tell me.
I don't think it's going to make anything better.
It was pretty awful of him to reveal, like to put Philippa in this position now. Like it's not his right to tell anyone what is going on with her.
Yeah.
Especially since he's not telling them that he also has a new passion.
No. Well, and he even thinks like right afterward he had not meant to go so far. But he's thinking about how Kate and Sibylla will carry the scar of this news, and it's like, dude, Philip was gonna have to deal with you revealing this. Like, it's her you should feel sorry that you revealed it in relation to.
I actually feel like Sibylla would be okay with the relationship.
Yeah.
Though. I think she would be almost excited about that.
Well, but the way he says it though is like, she's got a crush on me, and of course I'm not in love with her. I just, maybe I'll debauch her and then leave.
I mean, Richard is going to be an idiot and say something dumb. Like, you just feel like he's going to say something in front of Philippa that will be devastating to her. But I don't think Sibylla would. I think she wasn't great in this conversation, but she tends to be a little more compassionate and aware of people. But he says it in front of Richard too, and you can just totally see Richard saying something hurtful. And
he'll assume that Lymond just fostered this and like done it on purpose like made Philippa become ensconced in his affairs. And he already thinks that Lymond has kept Philippa back when it couldn't be further from the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, Sibylla definitely sees through it a bit more. She's like, and that is bombast. Richard, pay no attention. And then Lyman's saying to Richard, you don't quite have this problem. You don't have any problems, really, do you? Sitting there in your lordship pontificating. Just so juvenile.
Yeah.
It seems to be beyond you to even to get yourself decently drowned. Oh.
Yeah, so hurtful.
But
I mean, at the same time, I see like, you know, sometimes I feel when I go home to visit my parents, like I turn into the 17-year-old version of me, who I don't like very much, you know, and it's like when we get around family, we just kind of regress into the teenager version of who we are. And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And they all do it here.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Uh,
I mean, but there's also been years where this has been brewing, where these things have been unsaid to each other.
yeah.
And I mean, Richard got it out a little bit with Lymond a year ago after the Dickens ship went down. But the last time Lymond saw his mom, they didn't even say anything to each other. He just walked right by. So this is years of sort of resentment and these negative issues boiling underneath the surface.
Yeah, I mean, presumably that's why he was trying to avoid confronting her, because he knew it would go badly.
And it did, surprise.
So she says to him, I thought I was the excuse for your whole way of life. And then he says, who do you blame for your mistakes? Isabel's master.
And Richard doesn't get it, which of course.
He doesn't get it, but he sees Sibylla's upset, so he knows what he thinks he needs to know. And then she says, were we two other people, you would, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he says, but we are two other people, aren't we? What do you make of that? We are two other people.
Well, he's saying that she's not the mother that she always said she would be, because he believes that she's been unfaithful. And he's a completely different person because he's not the Lymond he was born and raised to think he was. Like he's a bastard.
She's deceiving about some part of her identity and she's really someone else. And he's been deceived about some part of his identity and he's really someone else. And
It's interestingly ambiguous because also he could mean literally, like, I'm literally not your son. If he believes that he's Beatrice's son and that the Frances Crawford she gave birth to died, then it's like, literally, you're not my mother, and that's why I'm upset. So it's like, it could be the figurative, you lied to me and I'm a bastard, or it could be the literal, like, I'm not even your son.
no, that's what I meant, that he's been deceived about who he is and she's been deceiving about who she is. And perhaps she's even deceiving other people around her, like she's really someone else and he's really someone else. Those are the two other people. Yeah.
So then we get the reveal that they hadn't planned it all in advance. Alec Ross had not intentionally misled him. So we have yet another constructed thing to make the melodrama bigger, which is that part of why Lymond is so nasty is because he thinks they set it up ahead of time, and it's like, they did not set it up ahead of time. She just took advantage of the moment.
Still not great.
Still not great, no.
Not great.
But not on the same level.
Yeah. And then he rides to the town in this terrible scene. Where...
Yeah. Well, so first of all, it's a terrible idea, but he's like, it's really interesting. He just thinks it's like so into his personality of like, I'm a professional. This is a performance. If I ever need these people, you know, I need to set its positive image right now. And so he does this ride, which is of course a terrible idea. And would it really have been that bad to just disappear and not do it? Like, they would have gotten over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he sees a face of a woman that he thinks he knows. And then shortly later, he gets rescued, and he says to James Stewart, "I gather we share the acquaintance of a lady named Martine." Do you remember this woman?
Wasn't she from Queensplay at the beginning? Yeah.
She was at the beginning, I think, and at the end. They unite at the end. She's a prostitute who
Yeah.
was getting like helping with the whole Robin Stewart thing, and they had a
Yeah.
lovely relationship similar to the one he had with what's her name, the woman who ran the ostrich. In
Oh yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so I guess we gather that Martine knows him well enough to recognize that he's sick and send help for him, which is pretty nice.
She helped him spy on things, I think. She was one of his informants.
Yeah, and she found some information that ended up coming through and helping save the day in Queensplay.
I didn't pick up that she had sent somebody to help him, though. That I didn't gather at all until you just said that. So,
Well, isn't that what he means when he says, "I gather we shared the acquaintance of a lady named Martine"?
I didn't
Yeah.
understand why that was there. So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that either. But
I actually didn't realize that the face he saw in the crowd was a real person. I thought it was like a vision or something, and then it was possibly Philippa, or like he saw Sibylla again in the crowd.
Mhm.
So I was just reading it the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think this is why I think he's not having the blindness yet. He's just having all these sensory things that are making him sicker, the smells and the sounds.
Mhm.
And yeah, he thinks he's gonna vomit, and he actually faints.
Yeah.
And the poor horse, just
Yeah.
under normal circumstances, it would have been fine with that horse, but it was not any time.
I hope they don't actually shoot the horse.
Oh, they won't shoot the horse.
No, they're not going to shoot the horse.
Oh, although it's Dorothy Dunnett, so maybe they will shoot the horse.
True.
But yeah, not the horse's fault.
Any other thoughts on these chapters? He needs a nap.
Well, we knew Lymond couldn't stay happy for long. So
Yeah, they were stressful chapters. This is definitely not the reunion between Sibylla and Richard that I was hoping for in Lymond. But also, we're not even halfway through the book yet, so hopefully we will. I mean, I guess this is like a low point, so we have to be at a low point to get to a high point. So hopefully we'll have a high point.
Yeah, you need the drama to keep the story going.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad they're there. You know, I'm glad it's not off. They're not off in Scotland. I'm glad they're here in France, and it's we really have like reached like we're almost at the middle of the book, so that's a good. We've got lots and lots of space for things to happen, and hopefully some conversations that aren't completely misunderstood in very dramatic ways.
Yeah, so what I guess what would the confrontation or reunion with Sibylla and Richard, what do you want to happen in it?
I want them to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
Not just blow up like they did again.
Yeah, I mean, I want them to sit down and do like the very. This is not going to happen, but what I want to happen is for them to sit down and just have a little conversation based on I statements. You know, like I felt this when I felt that when, you know, and just yeah, do like some serious therapy, and I don't know, maybe sit down and have Archie mediate the whole thing, something like
Philippa.
that. Or Philippa, yeah.
I think Philippa is going to be key to sort of having Sibylla and Lymond get through their issues. I think Philippa and Sibylla will probably talk about what's been going on, which isn't really fair if Philippa tells Sibylla what Lymond's whole thing is, like about the parentage. But I don't think Lymond's ever going to have that discussion with her, so somebody's got to do it.
Maybe. Yeah, I also hope Marta figures out her stuff. You know, she's clearly in so much pain, and like that whole, thinking back to that whole chapter about her insisting that Lyman and Philippa kiss and get together, and like she took it to such an extreme that there's something there where she's just, and I really wonder if it's she can't have this relationship, like she can't have it with Jarrett. And I think you were 100% right, Laura, about like the odds of her opening up and being vulnerable to Jarrett are slim, because she knows, like she sees him and she sees that he's in love with her brother, and like she's sort of a second choice. I think you're totally right there. And so I kind of wonder if her just taking that to a crazy level was an expression of, I don't know, she wants Philippa to get what she can't have or something. I don't know. Not that she doesn't want Lyman, but that she wants that relationship and connection. And
yeah, a lot of her stuff is like unself-aware projecting onto other people.
yeah, exactly.
It actually makes sense as a motive, like, and yeah, and it's just so awkwardly done, the way she tries to force it to happen, and it's like she's just missing this understanding of how human relationships work.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope she has some epiphany or some sort of like moment where she's able to heal too. And yeah,
I would love to see Marta have a discussion with Sibylla. Two characters I don't think have crossed paths yet, and I think it might help her understand a lot of the feelings that she's been having and why she seems to hate Lyman so much right now. Because I think she wants to be a part of the family, but also feels left out. So,
What do you think their conversation would be like?
I don't know, but I would love to read it.
I mean, I think it super depends on who Marta's parents are, right? And what Sibylla knows about who she is and
Yeah,
her life. And we just don't know what that is.
Any final thoughts or hopes or dreams to share?
I hope it gets better.
There's quite a lot left that needs to happen. So, for all of the answers to come forth.
We still got half a book.
Yep.
I will say that you can totally see all the relationship stuff that needs to happen. Like there's so much relationship stuff that needs to happen in the rest of this book. I don't know where the plot is going. Like, what are people gonna do? Because it feels like we need to have so many conversations, but obviously Dunnett's gonna hang all those conversations on a plot, and like things are gonna happen. But I have no idea where that's going, because like the war is kind of over, and what are we gonna do now? So I am super curious to see what's gonna happen, just kind of plot wise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main plot threads you have right now are like almost the there's the DeGeese thing that's sort of and then there's what's going to happen with Mary Queen of Scots' marriage.
Yeah. Oh, the wedding, right?
Yeah, and then there's also this sort of like Jane Austen, like Lyman and Catherine and Philippa and Austin.
Oh, right.
End up with who? And
yeah.
And then you've also got sort of the worries of, is Leonard Bailey in France? What's he going to do? How is oh, you know what I thought about that I would love to see is, I wonder what Margaret Lennox thinks about Lyman getting together with Catherine de Alban. Like, we saw how horrible she was towards Philippa, and their relationship wasn't even consummated. Right. It's like, I wonder how she'd react towards that.
Yeah, she has, we've both said that we hope she comes back at some point, because I just want a little bit more closure with that relationship. Mm-hmm. But does that mean that Margaret Lennox has to come to France, which seems not likely?
I don't think she could at the moment.
Yeah, could she come to France? Like, that seems, I don't know. Maybe she comes for the wedding. Maybe she comes for Mary Queen of Scots. Oh, but she's totally out of favor in Scotland. Never mind. That's not.
Yeah, she's like.
Yeah, that's right. That's not true.
Maybe she comes to visit D'Aubigny and bring him back into the fold.
Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Oh, I think he's sort of been sent out to the far reaches of France. He wasn't exiled, but
Was he kind of exiled though? Like,
kind of.
Actively exiled, right? He was given a position of no prominence out in the middle of nowhere.
right. Yeah, so I can't imagine how she would get to France, but it would be nice to have some interaction with her.
That's true. She was in France in Queen's Play, and that is her brother-in-law. But
Sure.
Yeah, but especially now with the enmities between France and England, especially after losing Calais.
Yeah, not the best time.
We'll see.
Yeah, so we'll see. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where the story goes with just, normally plot is not my thing. Normally I'm way more concerned about the characters and stuff, but I am intrigued about what's going to happen.
Well, yeah, it's not following a traditional like plot structure that you can be like, oh, here's the beats it's going to hit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it feels kind of it feels like we've had sort of a conclusion to part of the plot, and so now something new is going to happen. But
yeah, I don't want to ask this yet, but just keep it in mind for the future once we finish. Is like we were talking about each book, like what is the primary genre of this book? Like Queen's Play is a spy novel, and Game of Kings is like a Robin Hood adventure in a way. And so like what's the genre of this book? Because it's, and Pawn is obviously like a quest, like the Odyssey. So yeah, what's the genre on this one?
that's a good question.
Romance.
Maybe. We'll see.
We shall see.
YA dystopia.
No.
No.
I know people read this when they're like young, teenagers or whatever, but like, man, I'm impressed because there's so many words that even as an adult, I'm like, what does that mean?
Yes.
And there is fan art for these chapters, but I didn't get it ready in time, so I'll show it another time.
Let's do it at the beginning of next time.
Yeah.
All
right. Thank you everyone for watching and commenting. Bye-bye.
Bye.